Have you ever heard of a man who might have unlocked the secrets of immortality? Meet the Count of Saint Germain, an enigmatic figure whose life defies the bounds of history and reason. And described as an alchemist, a diplomat, and perhaps even a sorcerer, this 18th century aristocrat claimed wisdom that seemed to transcend human lifespans. Some said he never aged, others swore he possessed a cosmic knowledge from distant ages past. Yet, despite his influence, Saint Germain left behind just one written work, the Most Holy Trinosophia. Published as a bilingual French-English edition in 1933, this version was brought to light by Manly P. Hall, renowned author of The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Hall's edition includes illustrations from the original manuscript housed in the Bibliothèque de Troyes in France, giving us rare glimpses into Saint Germain's allegorical journey of spiritual initiation. This text reads like a mystical roadmap, a guide for seekers willing to unravel its cryptic symbols and alchemical secrets. Could this book hold hidden keys to transcendence, or perhaps clues about Saint Germain's own immortality? Today we open the pages of this extraordinary work and step into a world where alchemy meets philosophy, where ancient symbols speak of an age-old wisdom lost to time. Before we begin, let's pause to consider the significance of the book you're about to experience. The Most Holy Trinosophia is not merely a text, it's a rare artifact of spiritual wisdom and mystery, attributed to the elusive and almost mythic figure, the Count of Saint Germain. This journey, written in cryptic symbols and allegories, is thought to be a guide through the stages of spiritual initiation, crafted by a man who may have mastered the secrets of life itself. Each word, each passage invites us to transcend the mundane and step into a deeper realm of understanding, one that merges philosophy, alchemy, and mysticism. So take a deep breath, prepare your mind, and let the journey begin. This is The Most Holy Trinosophia by the Count of Saint Germain. A parallel French and English text of the Most Holy Trinosophia of the Comte de Saint Germain, with introductory material and commentary by Manly Hall, illustrated with the figures from the original manuscript in the Bibliothèque de Troyes. A curious investigator of all nature, I have known the beginning and end of the grand whole. I have seen gold and potential at the bottom of its river. I have grasped its substance and discovered its ferment. I explain by what art the soul, within a mother's womb, constructs its dwelling, brings it forth, and how a seed placed beside a grain of wheat in the damp soil, one becomes a plant, the other a vine, creating bread and wine. Nothing existed by God's will, nothing became something. I doubted, and I sought the foundation upon which the universe rests. Nothing maintained balance and served as support. Finally, with the weight of praise and blame, I weighed the eternal. It called my soul, I died, I worshipped, I knew nothing more. The Count of Saint Germain, the man who does not die. The great illuminist, Rosicrucian, and Freemason who termed himself the Comte de Saint Germain is without question the most baffling personality of modern history. His name was so nearly a synonym of mystery that the enigma of his true identity was as insolvable to his contemporaries as it has been to later investigators. No one questioned the Comte's noble birth or illustrious estate. His whole personality bore the indelible stamp of gentle breeding. The grace and dignity that characterized his conduct, together with his perfect composure in every situation, attested the innate refinement and culture of one accustomed to high station. A London publication makes the following brief analysis of his ancestry. Did he in his old age tell the truth to his protector and enthusiastic admirer, Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel? According to the story told by his last friend, he was the son of Prince Rákóczi of Transylvania, and his first wife, Etekli, he was placed, when an infant, under the protection of the last of the Medici, Jean Gaston. When he grew up and heard that his two brothers, sons of the Princess Hesse-Rheinfels of Runthurg, had received the names of St. Charles and St. Elizabeth, he determined to take the name of their holy brother, St. Germanus. What was the truth? One thing alone is certain, that he was the protege of the last Medici. Cr. Cantu, librarian at Milan, also substantiates the Ragazzi hypothesis, adding that St. Germain was educated in the university at Siena. In her excellent monograph, The Comte de Saint Germain, The Secret of Kings, Mrs. Cooper Oakley lists the more important names under which this amazing person masqueraded between the years 1710 and 1822. During this time, She writes, we have M. de Saint Germain as the Marquis de Montferrat, Comte de Bellemare or Aymar at Venice, Chevalier Schoening at Pisa, Chevalier Weldon at Milan and Leipzig, Comte Soltikoff at Genoa and Leghorn, Graf Zarelgi at Schwalbach and Treisdorf, Prince Ragazzi at Dresden, and Comte de Saint Germain at Paris, The Hague, London, and St. Petersburg. To this list, it may be added that there has been a tendency among mystical writers to connect him with the mysterious Comte de Gabelais, who appeared to the Abbé Villiers and delivered several discourses on submundane spirits. Nor is it impossible that he is the same as the remarkable Signer Goldie, whose exploits Hargreave Jennings recounts in his book The Rosicrucians, Their Rites and Mysteries. He is also suspected of being identical with Count Hompesch, the last Grand Master of the Knights of Malta. In personal appearance, the Comte de Saint Germain has been described as of medium height, well-proportioned in body, and of regular and pleasing features. His complexion was somewhat swarthy, and his hair dark, though often powdered. He dressed simply, usually in black, but his clothes were well-fitting and of the best quality. His eyes possessed a great fascination, and those who looked into them were profoundly influenced. According to Madame de Pompadour, he claimed to possess the secret of eternal youth, and upon a certain occasion claimed having been personally acquainted with Cleopatra, and at another time of having chatted familiarly with the Queen of Sheba. Had it not been for his striking personality and apparently supernatural powers, the Comte would undoubtedly have been considered insane, but his transcending genius was so evident that he was merely termed eccentric. From Souvenirs de Marie Antoinette by Madame la Comtesse d'Adhémar, we have an excellent description of the Comte, whom Frederick the Great referred to as the man who does not die. It was in 1743. The rumor spread that a foreigner, enormously rich, judging by the magnificence of his jewelry, had just arrived at Versailles. Where he came from, no one has ever been able to find out. His figure was well knit and graceful, his hands delicate, his feet small, and the shapely legs enhanced by well-fitting silk stockings. His nether garments, which fitted very closely, suggested a rare perfection of form. His smile showed magnificent teeth, a pretty dimple marked his chin, his hair was black, and his glance soft and penetrating. And oh, what eyes, never have I seen their like. He looked about 40 or 45 years old. He was often to be met within the royal private apartments, where he had unrestricted admission at the beginning of 1768. The Comte de Saint Germain was recognized as an outstanding scholar and linguist of his day. His linguistic proficiency verged on the supernatural. He spoke German, English, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, French with a Piedmontese accent, Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Arabic, and Chinese with such fluency that in every land in which he visited he was accepted as a native. Learned, writes one author, speaking every civilized language admirably. A great musician, an excellent chemist, he played the part of a prodigy and played it to perfection. Even his most relentless detractors admitted that the Comte was possessed of almost incredible attainments in every department of learning. Madame de Pompadour extols the genius of Saint Germain in the following words: a thorough knowledge of all languages, ancient and modern, a prodigious memory, erudition, of which glimpses could be caught between the caprices of his conversation, which was always amusing and occasionally very engaging, and inexhaustible skill in varying the tone and subjects of his converse. Person being always fresh and in infusing the unexpected into the most trivial discourses made him a superb talker. Sometimes he recounted anecdotes of the court of the Valois, or of princes still more remote, with such precise accuracy in every detail as almost to create the illusion that he had been an eyewitness to what he narrated. He had traveled the whole world over, and the king lent a willing ear to the narratives of his voyages over Asia and Africa, and to his tales about the courts of Russia, Turkey, and Austria. He appeared to be more intimately acquainted with the secrets of each court than the chargé d'affaires of the king. The Comte was ambidextrous to such a degree that he could write the same article with both hands simultaneously. When the two pieces of paper were afterwards placed one upon the other with the light behind them, the writing on one sheet exactly covered the writing on the other. He could repeat pages of print after one reading. To prove that the two lobes of his brain could work independently, he wrote a love letter with his right hand and a set of mystical verses with his left, both at the same time. He also sang beautifully. By something akin to telepathy, this remarkable person was able to feel when his presence was needed in some distant city or state, and it has even been recorded of him that he had the disconcerting habit of appearing in his own apartments and those of his friends without resorting to the inventionality of the door. He was, by some curious circumstances, a patron of railroads and steamboats. Franz Graefer, in his Recollections of Vienna, recounts the following incident in the life of the astonishing Comte de Saint Germain, then gradually passed into a solemn mood. For a few seconds he became rigid as a statue, his eyes, which were always expressive beyond words, became dull and colorless. Presently, however, his whole being became reanimated. He made a movement with his hand as if in signal of departure, then said, "I am leaving each side, do not visit me. Once again will you see me. Tomorrow night I am off, I am much needed in Constantinople. Then in England, there to prepare 2 inventions which you will have in the next century, trains and steamboats." As an historian, the Comte possessed an uncanny knowledge of every occurrence of the preceding 2,000 years, and in his reminiscences he described in intimate detail events of the previous centuries in which he had played important roles. He spoke of scenes at the court of Francis I as if he had seen them, describing exactly the appearance of the king, imitating his voice, manner, and language, affecting throughout the character of an eyewitness. In like style, he edified his audience with pleasant stories of Louis XIV and regaled them with vivid descriptions of places and persons. See all the year round. Most of Saint Germain's biographers have noted his peculiar habits with regard to eating. It was diet, he declared, combined with his marvelous elixir, which constituted the true secret of longevity, and although invited to the most sumptuous repasts, he resolutely refused to eat any food but such as had been specially prepared for him and according to his recipes. His food consisted mostly of oatmeal, groats, and the white meat of chicken. He is known on rare occasions to have taken a little wine, and he always took the most elaborate precautions against the possibility of contracting cold. Frequently invited to dinner, he devoted the time during which he naturally should have eaten to regaling the other guests with tales of magic and sorcery, unbelievable adventures in remote places, and intimate episodes from the lives of the great. In one of his tales concerning vampires, Saint Germain mentioned in an offhand way that he possessed the wand or staff with which Moses brought water from the rock, adding that it had been presented to him at Babylon during the reign of Cyrus the Great. The memoir writers admit themselves at a loss as to how many of the Comte's statements could be believed. Common sense, as then defined, assured them that most of the accounts must be fashioned out of whole cloth. On the other hand, his information was of such precise nature and his learning so transcendent in every respect that his words carried the weight of conviction. Once, while relating an anecdote regarding his own experiences at some remote time, and suddenly failing to recollect clearly what he considered a relevant detail, he turned to his valet and said, "Am I not mistaken, Roger?" The good man instantly replied, "Monsieur le Comte forgets that I have only been with him for 500 years. I could not, therefore, have been present at that occasion. It must have been my predecessor." The smallest doings of so unusual a person as Saint Germain would of course be meticulously noted. Several interesting and amusing bits of information are available relative to the establishment which he maintained in Paris. He had 2 valets de chambre. The first, Roger, already mentioned, and the second a Parisian engaged for his knowledge of the city and other useful local information. Besides this, his household consisted of 4 lackeys in snuff-colored livery and gold braiding. He hired a carriage at 500 francs a month. As he often changed his coats and waistcoats, he had a rich and expensive collection of them, but nothing approached the magnificence of his buttons, studs, watches, rings, chains, diamonds, and other precious stones. Of these he possessed a very large value and varied them every week. Meeting Saint Germain one day at dinner, Baron Gleichen chanced to focus the conversation upon Italy and had the good fortune to please Saint Germain, who, turning to him, remarked, "I have taken a great fancy to you, and will show you a dozen pictures, the like of which you have not seen in Italy." In the words of Gleichen, actually, he almost kept his word, for the pictures he showed me were all stamped either with singularity or perfection, which rendered them more interesting than many first-class works. Above all was a Holy Family by Murillo, equal in beauty to that by Raphael at Versailles. But he showed me other wonders, a large quantity of jewels and colored diamonds of extraordinary size and perfection. I thought I beheld the treasures of the wonderful lamp. Among other gems were an opal of monstrous size, and a white sapphire, as large as an egg, which by its brilliancy dimmed all the stones compared with it. I flatter myself that I am a connoisseur in gems, but I can declare that it was impossible to perceive any reason for doubting the genuineness of these jewels. The more so that they were not mounted. As an art critic, Saint Germain could instantly detect the most cleverly perpetrated forgeries. He did considerable painting himself, achieving an incredible brilliance of color. He was so successful that Van Loo, the French artist, begged him to divulge the secret of his pigments, but he refused. He is accredited with having secured astonishing results in the painting of jewelry by mixing powdered mother of pearl with his colors. What occurred to his priceless collection of paintings and jewels after his death or disappearance is unknown. It is possible that the Comte's chemical knowledge comprehended the manufacture of luminous paint, such as is now used on watch dials. His skill as a chemist was so profound that he could remove flaws from diamonds and emeralds, which feat he actually performed at the request of Louis XV in 1757. Stones of comparatively little value were thus transformed into gems of the first water after remaining for a short time in his possession. He frequently performed this last experiment, if the statements of his friends can be relied upon. There is also a popular story to the effect that he placed gems worth thousands of dollars on the place cards at the banquets he gave. It was in the court at Versailles that the Comte de Saint Germain was brought face to face with the elderly Comtesse de Gergy. Upon beholding the celebrated magician, the aged lady stepped back in amazement, and the following well-authenticated conversation took place between the two. 50 years ago, the Comtesse said, "I was ambassadress at Venice, and I remember seeing you there looking just as you do now, only somewhat repper in age perhaps, for you have grown younger since then." Bowing low, the Comte answered with dignity, "I have always thought myself happy in being able to make myself agreeable to the ladies." Madame de Gergy then continued, "You then called yourself the Marquise Belletti." The Comte bowed again and replied, "And Comtesse Gergy's memory is still as good as it was 50 years ago." The Comtesse smiled. "That I owed to an elixir you gave me at our first meeting. You are really an extraordinary man." Saint Germain assumed a grave expression. "Did this Marquise Belletti have a bad reputation?" he asked. "On the contrary," replied the Comtesse, "he was in very good society." The Comte shrugged his shoulders expressively, saying, "Well, as no one complains of him, I adopt him willingly as my grandfather." The Comtesse d'Adhemar was present during the entire conversation and vouches for its accuracy in every detail. Madame du Hausset, femme de chambre to Madame de Pompadour, writes at some length of the astonishing man, who often called upon her mistress. She records a conversation which took place between La Pompadour and Saint Germain. "It is true, madame, that I knew Madame de Gergy long ago," the Comte affirmed quietly. "But according to that," replied the Marquise, "you must now be more than 100 years old." "That is not impossible," enigmatically returned the Comte with a slight smile. "But I admit that it is more possible that this lady, for whom I have infinite respect, talks nonsense." It was answers such as this which led Gustave Bord to write of Saint Germain that he allows a certain mystery to hover about him, a mystery which awakens curiosity and sympathy. Being a virtuoso in the art of misleading, he says nothing that is untrue. He has the rare gift of remaining silent and profiting by it. See La Franc-Maçonnerie in France, etc. But to return to Madame du Hausset's story. You gave Madame de Gergy Presta Pompadour, an elixir surprising in its effects. She pretends that tore along while she appeared to be no older than 24. Why should you not give some to the king? Saint Germain allowed an expression feigning terror to spread over his face. "Ah, madame, I should be mad indeed to take it into my head to give the king an unknown drug." The Comte was on very friendly terms with Louis XV, with whom he had long discussions on the subject of precious stones, their manufacture and purification. Louis was amused and thrilled by turns. Never before had so extraordinary a person trod the sacred precincts of Versailles. The whole court was topsy-turvy, and miracles were the order of the day. Courtiers of depleted fortunes envisioned the magical multiplication of their gold, and grandames of uncertain age had dreams of youth and favor restored by the mystery man's fabled elixirs. It is easy to understand how so fascinating a character could relieve the boredom of a king who had spent his life a martyr to royal fashions, and was deprived by his position of the pleasure of honest work. Then again, rulers become victims to the fads of the moment, and Louis himself was dabbling in alchemy and other occult arts. True, the king was only a dilettante whose will was not strong enough to bind him to any lasting purpose, but Saint Germain appealed to several qualities in the royal nature. The Comte's fund of knowledge, the skill with which he assembled his facts to the amusement and edification of his audiences, the mystery which surrounded his appearances and disappearances, his consummate skill both as a critic and technician in the arts and sciences, to say nothing of his jewels and wealth, endeared him to the king. Had Louis but profited by the wisdom and prophetic warnings of the mysterious Comte, the reign of terror might have been averted. Saint Germain was ever the patron, never the patronized. Louis had found the diplomat in whom there was no guile. De Pompadour writes, he enriched the cabinet of the king by his pictures by Velázquez and Murillo, and he presented to the Marquise the most precious and priceless gems. For this singular man passed for being fabulously rich, and he distributed diamonds and jewels with astonishing liberality. Not the least admirable evidence of the Comte's genius was his penetrating grasp of the political situation of Europe and the consummate skill with which he parried the thrusts of his diplomatic adversaries. At all times he bore credentials which gave him entry to the most exclusive circles of European nobility. During the reign of Peter the Great, Monsieur de Saint Germain was in Russia, and between the years 1737 and 1742 in the court of the Shah of Persia as an honored guest. On the subject of his wanderings, Una Birch writes, the travels of the Comte de Saint Germain covered a long period of years and a great range of countries. From Persia to France, and from Calcutta to Rome he was known and respected. Horace Walpole spoke with him in London in 1745. Clive knew him in India in 1756. Madame d'Adhemar alleges that she met him in Paris in 1789, 5 years after his supposed death. While other persons pretend to have held conversations with him in the early 19th century, he was on familiar and intimate terms with the crowned heads of Europe and the honored friend of many distinguished persons of all nationalities. He is even mentioned in the memoirs and letters of the day, and always as a man of mystery. Frederick the Great, Voltaire, Madame de Pompadour, Rousseau, Chatham, and Walpole, all of whom knew him personally, rivaled each other in curiosity as to his origin. During the many decades in which he was before the world, however, no one succeeded in discovering why he appeared as a Jacobite agent in London, as a conspirator in Petersburg, as an alchemist innocent connoisseur of pictures in Paris, or as a Russian general at Naples. Now and again, the curtain which shrouds his actions is drawn aside, and we are permitted to see him fiddling in the music room at Versailles, gossiping with Horace Walpole in London, sitting in Frederick the Great's library at Berlin, or conducting luminous meetings in caverns by the Rhine. See the 19th century, January 1908. In the realm of music, Saint Germain was equally a master. While at Versailles, he gave concerts on the violin, and on at least one occasion during an eventful life, he conducted a symphony orchestra without a score. In Paris, Saint Germain was the diplomat and the alchemist. In London, he was the musician. He left a musical record behind him to remind English people of his sojourn in this country. Many of his compositions were published by Walsh in Catherine Street, Strand, and his earliest English song, "Oh, Wouldst Thou Know What Sacred Charms," came out while he was still on his first visit to London, but on quitting this city he entrusted certain other settings of words to Walsh, such as Jove, When He Saw, and the arias out of his little opera El Inconstanza de Lusa, both of which compositions were published during his absence from England. When he returned in 1760, he gave the world a great many new songs, followed in 1780 by a set of solos for the violin. He was an industrious and capable artist, and attracted a great deal of fashionable attention to himself, both as composer and executant. An old English newspaper, the London Chronicle, for June 1760, contains the following anecdote with regard to music. He not only played but composed, and both in high taste. Nay, his very ideas were accommodated to the art. And in those occurrences which had no relation to music, he found means to express himself in figurative terms deduced from this science. There could not be a more artful way of showing his attention to the subject. I remember an incident which impressed us strongly upon my memory. I had the honor to be at an assembly of lady, who to many other good and great accomplishments added a taste for music so delicate that she was made a judge in the dispute of masters. This stranger was to be of the party, and towards evening he came in his usual free and polite manner, but with more hurry than was customary, and with his fingers stopped in his ears. I can conceive easily that in most men this would have been a very ungraceful attitude, and I am afraid it would have been construed into an ungenteel entrance, but he had a manner that made everything agreeable. They had been emptying a cartload of stones just at the door. To mend the pavement he threw himself into a chair, and when the lady asked what was the matter, he pointed to the place and said, "I am stunned with a whole cartload of discords." In his memoirs, the Italian adventurer Jacques de Casanova de Singault makes numerous references to his acquaintance with Saint Germain. Casanova grudgingly admits that the Comte was an adept at magical arts, a skilled linguist, musician and chemist who won the favor of the ladies of the French court, not only by the general air of mystery surrounding him, but by his surpassing skill in preparing pigments and cosmetics by which he preserved for them at least a shadow of swift departing youth. Casanova describes a meeting with Saint Germain which occurred in Belgium under most unusual circumstances. Having arrived at Tournai, Casanova was surprised to see some grooms walking spirited horses up and down. He asked to whom the fine animals belonged and was told, to the Comte de Saint Germain, the adept, who has been here a month and never goes out. Everybody who passes through the place wants to see him, but he makes himself visible to no one. This was sufficient to excite the curiosity of Casanova, who wrote requesting an appointment. He received the following answer: "The gravity of my occupation compels me to exclude everyone, but in your case I will make an exception. Come whenever you like and you will be shown in. You need not mention my name nor your own. I do not ask you to share my repast, for my food is not suitable to others, to you least of all. If your appetite is what it used to be at 9 o'clock, Casanova called and found that the Comte had grown a beard 2 inches long. In discussion with Casanova, the Comte explained his presence in Belgium by stating that Count Cobenzl, the Austrian ambassador at Brussels, desired to establish a hat factory, and that he was taking care of the details. Upon his telling Saint Germain that he was suffering from an acute disease, the Comte invited Casanova to remain for treatment, saying that he would prepare 15 pills which in 3 days would restore the Italian to perfect health. Casanova writes, "Then he showed me his magistrum, which he called athoator. It was a white liquid contained in a well-stopped phial. He told me that this liquid was the universal spirit of nature, and that if the wax of the stopper was pricked even so slightly, the whole of the contents would disappear. I begged him to make the experiment. He thereupon gave me the phial and the pin, and I myself pricked the wax, when lo, the phial was empty. Casanova, being somewhat of a rogue himself, doubted all other men. Therefore, he refused to permit Saint Germain to treat his malady. He could not deny, however, that Saint Germain was a chemist of extraordinary skill, whose accomplishments were astonishing if not practical. The adept refused to disclose the purpose for which these chemical experiments were intended, maintaining that such information could not be communicated. Casanova further records an incident in which Saint Germain changed a 12 sols piece into a pure gold coin. Being a doubting Thomas, Casanova declared that he felt sure that Saint Germain had substituted one coin for another. He intimated so to the Comte, who replied, "Those who are capable of entertaining doubts of my work are not worthy to speak to me," and bowed the Italian out. This was the last time Casanova ever saw Saint Germain. There is other evidence that the celebrated Comte possessed the alchemical powder by which it is possible to transmute base metals into gold. He actually performed this feat on at least 2 occasions, as attested by the writings of contemporaries. The Marquis de Valbel, visiting Saint Germain in his laboratory, found the alchemist busy with his furnaces. He asked the Marquis for a silver 6-franc piece and, covering it with a black substance, exposed it to the heat of a small flame or furnace. Monsieur de Valbel saw the coin change color until it turned a bright red. Some minutes after, when it had cooled a little, the adept took it out of the cooling vessel and returned it to the Marquis. The piece was no longer of silver but of the purest gold. Transmutation had been complete. The Comtesse d'Adhémar had possession of this coin until 1786, when it was stolen from her secretary. One author tells us that Saint Germain always attributed his knowledge of occult chemistry to his sojourn in Asia. In 1755, he went to the East again for the 2nd time. In writing to Count von Lamberg, he said, "I am indebted for my knowledge of melting jewels to my 2nd journey to India." There are too many authentic cases of metallic transmutations to condemn Saint Germain as a charlatan for such a feat. The Leopold Hoffmann medal, still in the possession of that family, is the most outstanding example of the transmutation of metals ever recorded. 2/3 of this metal was transformed into gold by the monk Wenzel Saylor, leaving the balance silver, which was its original state. In this case, fraud was impossible, as there was but one copy of the metal extant. The ease with which we condemn as fraudulent and unreal anything which transcends our understanding has brought unjustified calumny upon the names and memories of many illustrious persons. The popular belief that Comte de Saint Germain was merely an adventurer is not supported by even a shred of evidence. He was never detected in any subterfuge, nor did he betray, even to the slightest degree, the confidence entrusted to him. His great wealth, for he was always amply supplied with this world's goods, was not extracted from those with whom he came in contact. Every effort to determine the source and size of his fortune was fruitless. He made use of neither bank nor banker, yet moved in a sphere of unlimited credit, which was neither questioned by others nor abused by himself. Referring to the attacks upon his character, H.P. Blavatsky wrote in the Theosophist of March, 1881, "Do charlatans enjoy the confidence and admiration of the cleverest statesmen and nobles of Europe for long years, and not even at their deaths show in one thing that they were undeserving?" Some encyclopedists, see New American Encyclopedia 14266, say. He is supposed to have been employed during the greater part of his life as a spy at the courts at which he resided, but upon what evidence is this supposition based? Has anyone found it in any of the state papers in the secret archives of either of those courts? Not one word, not one shred of fact to build this base calumny upon, has ever been found. It is simply a malicious lie. The treatment this great man, this pupil of Indian and Egyptian hierophants, this proficient in the secret wisdom of the East, has had from Western writers is a stigma upon human nature. Nothing is known concerning the source of the Comte de Saint Germain's occult knowledge. Most certainly he not only intimated his possession of a vast amount of wisdom, but he also gave many examples in support of his claims. When asked once about himself, he replied that his father was the secret doctrine and his mother the mysteries. Saint Germain was thoroughly conversant with the principles of Oriental esotericism. He practiced the Eastern system of meditation and concentration, upon several occasions having been seen seated with his feet crossed and hands folded in the posture of a Hindu Buddha. He had a retreat in the heart of the Himalayas to which he retired periodically from the world. On one occasion he declared that he would remain in India for 85 years and then return to the scene of his European labors. At various times he admitted that he was obeying the orders of a power higher and greater than himself. What he did not say was that this superior power was the mystery school which had sent him into the world to accomplish a definite mission. The Comte de Saint Germain and Sir Francis Bacon are the two greatest emissaries sent in the world by the secret brotherhood in the last 1,000 years. The principles disseminated by the Comte de Saint Germain were undoubtedly Rosicrucian in origin and permeated with the doctrines of the Gnostics. The Comte was the moving spirit of Rosicrucianism during the 18th century, possibly the actual head of that order, and is suspected of being the great power behind the French Revolution. There is also reason to believe that Lord Bulwer-Lytton's famous novel Zanoni is actually concerned with the life and activities of Saint Germain. He is generally regarded as an important figure in the early activities of the Freemasons. Repeated efforts, however, probably with an ulterior motive, have been made to discredit his Masonic affiliations. Mags of London are offering for sale a Masonic minute book, in which the signatures of both Comte de Saint Germain and the Marquis de Lafayette appear. It will yet be established beyond all doubt that the Comte was both a Mason and a Templar. In fact, the memoirs of Cagliostro contain a direct statement of his own initiation into the Order of the Knights Templars at the hands of Saint Germain. Many of the illustrious personages with whom the Comte associated were high Masons, and sufficient memoranda have been preserved concerning the discussions which they held to prove that he was a chaster of Freemasonic lore. Madame d'Adhémar, who has preserved so many anecdotes of the life of the Wonder Man, copied from one of Saint Germain's letters the following prophetic verses pertaining to the downfall of the French Empire. The time is fast approaching when imprudent France, surrounded by misfortune, she might have spared herself, will call to mind such hell as Dante painted. Falling shall we see scepter, censer, scales, towers, and escutcheons, even the white flag. Great streams of blood are flowing in each town. Sobs only do I hear and exiles see. On all sides civil discord loudly roars, and uttering cries on all sides virtue flees, as from the assembly votes of death arise. Great God, who can reply to murderous judges? And on what brows august I see the swords descend. Marie Antoinette was much disturbed by the direful nature of the prophecies and questioned Madame d'Adhémar as to her opinion of their significance. Madame replied, "They are dismaying, but certainly they cannot affect your majesty." Madame d'Adhémar also recounts a dramatic incident. Saint Germain offered to meet the good lady at the Church of the Recollects about the hour of the 8 o'clock Mass. Madame went to the appointed place in her sedan chair and recorded the following conversation between herself and the mysterious adept. Saint Germain, I am Cassandra, prophet of evil. Madame, he who sows the wind reaps the whirlwind. I can do nothing, my hands are tied by a stronger than myself. Madame, will you see the queen? Saint Germain knows she is doomed. Madame, doomed to what? Saint Germain, death. Madame, and you too? Saint Germain, yes, like Cazat returned to the palace, tell the queen to take heed of herself, that this day will be fatal to her. Madame, but Monsieur de Lafayette? Saint Germain, a balloon inflated with wind. Even now, they are settling what to do with him, whether he shall be instrument or victim. By noon, all will be decided. The hour of repose is past, and the decrees of Providence must be fulfilled. Madame, what do they want? Saint Germain, the complete ruin of the Bourbons. They will expel them from all the thrones they occupy, and in less than a century they will return, in all their different branches, to the rank of simple private individuals. France as kingdom, republic, empire, and mixed government will be tormented, agitated, torn. From the hands of class tyrants she will pass to those who are ambitious and without merit. Comte de Saint Germain disappeared from the stage of French mysticism as suddenly and inexplicably as he had appeared. Nothing is known with positive certainty after that disappearance. It is claimed by transcendentalists that he retired into the secret order which had sent him into the world for a particular and peculiar purpose. Having accomplished this mission, he vanished. From the Memoirs de Montemps of Charles, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, we gain several particulars concerning the last years before the death or disappearance of the Hungarian adept. Charles was deeply interested in occult and Masonic mysteries, and a secret society, of which he was the moving spirit, held occasional meetings upon his estate. The purposes of this organization were similar to, if not identical with, Cagliostro's Egyptian rite. In fact, after studying the fragments left by the Landgrave, Cagliostro's contention that he was initiated into Egyptian masonry by Saint Germain is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The Wonder Man attended at least some of these secret meetings, and of all whom he met and knew during life, he confided more in Prince Charles than in any other man. The last years of Saint Germain's known life were therefore divided between his experimental research work in alchemy with Charles of Hesse and the mystery school at Louisenlund in Schleswig, where philosophic and political problems were under discussion. According to popular tradition, it was on the estate of Prince Charles that Saint Germain finally died at a date given out as 1784. The strange circumstances connected with his passing lead us to suspect that it was a mock funeral similar to that given the English adept, Lord Bacon. It has been noted that great uncertainty and vagueness surround his latter days, for no confidence can be reposed in the announcement of the death of one illuminate by another, for, as is well known, all means to secure the end were in their code justifiable. And it may have been to the interest of the society that Saint Germain should have been thought dead. H.P. Blavatsky remarks, is it not absurd to suppose that if he really died at the time and place mentioned, he would have been laid in the ground without the pomp and ceremony, the official supervision, the police registration which attend the funerals of men of his rank and notoriety? Where are these data? He passed out of public sight more than a century ago, yet no memoirs contain them. A man who so lived in the full blaze of publicity could not have vanished if he really died then and there, and left no trace behind. Moreover, to this negative we have the alleged positive proof that he was living several years after 1784. He is said to have had a most important private conference with the Empress of Russia in 1785 or 1786, and to have appeared to the Princess de Lamballe when she stood before the tribunal a few minutes before she was struck down with a billet and a butcher boy cut off her head, and to Jeanne du Barry, the mistress of Louis VII, as she waited on her scaffold at Paris the stroke of the guillotine in the days of terror of 1793. It should be added that the Comte de Calonne, on his return from an embassy to Venice in 1788, said that he had conversed with the Comte Saint Germain in the square at St. Mark's the evening before his departure. The Comtesse d'Adhémar also saw and talked with him after his presumed decease, and the Encyclopedia Britannica notes that he is said to have attended a Masonic conference several years after his death had been reported. In concluding an article on the identity of the inscrutable Comte, Andrew Lang writes, did Saint Germain really die in the palace of Prince Charles of Hesse about 1780 through 85? Did he, on the other hand, escape from the French prison where Grossi thought he saw him? During the Revolution? Was he known to Lord Lytton about 1860? Is he the mysterious Muscovite advisor of the Dalai Lama? Who knows? He is a will-o'-the-wisp of the memoir writers of the 18th century. See Historical Mysteries. The true purpose for which Saint Germain labored must remain obscure until the dawn of a new era. Homer refers to the golden chain by which the gods conspired to bind the earth to the pinnacle of Olympus. In each age there appears some few persons whose words and actions demonstrate clearly that they are of an order different from the rest of society. Humanity is guided over critical periods in the development of civilization by mysterious forces, such as were personified in the eccentric Comte de Saint Germain. Until we recognize the reality of the occult forces at work in everyday life, we cannot grasp the significance of either the man or his work. To the wise, Saint Germain is no wonder. To those who are limited by belief in the inevitability of the commonplace, he is indeed a magician, defying the laws of nature and violating the smugness of the pseudo-learned. Part 2. The rarest of occult manuscripts. Of the utmost significance to all students of Freemasonry and the occult sciences is this unique manuscript, La Très Sainte Trinosophie. Not only is it the only known mystical writing of the Comte de Saint Germain, but it is one of the most extraordinary documents relating to the Hermetic sciences ever compiled. Though the libraries of European Rosicrucians and Kabbalists contain many rare treasures of ancient philosophical lore, it is extremely doubtful if any of them include a treatise of greater value or significance. There is a persistent rumor that Saint Germain possessed a magnificent library, and that he prepared a number of manuscripts on the secret sciences for the use of his disciples. At the time of his death or disappearance, these books and papers vanished, probably into the archives of his society, and no trustworthy information is now available as to their whereabouts. The mysterious Comte is known to have possessed at one time a copy of the Vatican manuscript of the Kabbalah, a work of extraordinary profundity setting forth the doctrines of the Luciferians, Lucianists, and the Gnostics. The second volume of The Secret Doctrine, by H.P. Blavatsky, pages 582 through 83 of the original edition, contains 2 quotations from a manuscript supposed to be by the Saint Germain. The parts of the paragraphs attributed to the Hungarian adept are not clearly indicated, but as the entire text deals with the significance of numbers, it is reasonable to infer that his commentaries are mystical interpretations of the numerals 4 and 5. Both paragraphs are in substance similar to the Puissance des Nombres d'Apres Pythagore by Jean-Marie Regan. The Mahatma Kud, whom he mentions, a ciphered manuscript by Saint Germain which remained with his staunch friend and patron, the benevolent Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel. See Mahatma Letters to a Pisonet. Comparatively unimportant references to Saint Germain, and wild speculations concerning his origin and the purpose of his European activities are available in abundance. But the most exhaustive search of the work of 18th century memoir writers for information regarding the Masonic and metaphysical doctrines which he promulgated has proved fruitless. So far as it has been possible to ascertain, the present translation and publication of La Très Sainte Trinosophie affords the first opportunity to possess a work setting forth, in the usual veiled and symbolic manner, the esoteric doctrines of Saint Germain and his associates. La Très Sainte Trinosophie is manuscript number 2400 in the French library at Troyes. The work is of no great length, consisting of 96 leaves written upon one side only. The calligraphy is excellent. Although somewhat irregular in spelling and accenting, the French is scholarly and dramatic, and the text is embellished with numerous figures, well drawn and brilliantly colored. In addition to the full-page drawings, there are small symbols at the beginning and end of each of the sections. Throughout the French text, there are scattered letters, words, and phrases in several ancient languages. There are also magical symbols, figures resembling Egyptian hieroglyphics, and a few words and characters resembling cuneiform. At the end of the manuscript are a number of leaves written in arbitrary ciphers, possibly the code used by Saint Germain's secret society. The work was probably executed in the latter part of the 18th century, though most of the material belongs to a considerably earlier period. As to the history of this remarkable manuscript, too little, unfortunately, is known. The illustrious Freemasonic martyr, the Comte de Alessandro Cagliostro, carried this book amongst others with him on his ill-fated journey to Rome. After Cagliostro's incarceration in the Castle San Leo, all trace of the manuscript was temporarily lost. Eventually, Cagliostro's literary effects came into the possession of a general in Napoleon's army, and upon this officer's death, La Très Sainte Trinosophie was bought at a nominal price by the Bibliothèque de Troyes. In his Musée des Sorciers, Grillet de Givry adds somewhat to the meager notes concerning the manuscript. He states that the volume was bought at the sale of Massena's effects, that in the front of the book is a note by a philosopher, who signs himself IBC Philetom, who states that the manuscript belonged to him and is the sole existing copy of the famous Trinosophie of the Comte de Saint Germain, the original of which the Comte himself destroyed on one of his journeys. The note then adds that Cagliostro had owned the volume, but that the Inquisition had seized it in Rome when he was arrested at the end of 1789. It should be remembered that Cagliostro and his wife had visited Saint Germain at a castle, and Holstein de Givry sums up the contents of La Très Sainte Trinosophie as Kabbalized alchemy, and describes Saint Germain as one of the enigmatic personages of the 18th century, an alchemist and man of the world who passed through the drawing rooms of all Europe and ended by falling into the dungeons of the Inquisition at Rome, if the manuscript is to be believed. The title of the manuscript, La Très Sainte Trinosophie, translated into English, means the Most Holy Trinosophia, or the Most Holy Threefold Wisdom. The title itself opens a considerable field of speculation. Is there any connection between La Très Sainte Trinosophie and the Masonic Brotherhood of Les Trinosophists, which was founded in 1805 by the distinguished Belgian Freemason and mystic Jean-Marie Raguin, already referred to? The knowledge of occultism possessed by Raguin is mentioned in terms of the highest respect by H.P. Blavatsky, who says of him that for 50 years he studied the ancient mysteries wherever he could find accounts of them. Is it not possible that Raguin as a young man either knew Saint Germain or contacted his secret society? Raguin was termed by his contemporaries the most learned Mason of the 19th century. In 1818, before the Lodge of Les Trinosophists, he delivered a course of lectures on ancient and modern initiation, which he repeated at the request of that lodge in 1841. These lectures were published under the title Cours philosophique et interprétatif des initiations anciennes et modernes. In 1853, Raguin published his most important work, Orthodoxie mécanique. Raguin died in Paris about 1866, and 2 years later his unfinished manuscripts were purchased from his heirs by the Grand Orient of France for 1,000 francs. A high Mason told Madame Blavatsky that Raguin had corresponded for years with 2 Orientalists in Syria and Egypt, one of whom was a Copt gentleman. Raguin defined the Lodge of the Trinosophists as those who study 3 sciences. Madame Blavatsky writes it is on the occult properties of the 3 equal lines or sides of the triangle that Raguin based his studies and founded the famous Masonic Society of the Trinosophists. Raguin describes the symbolism of the triangle in substance as follows. The first side or line represents the mineral kingdom, which is the proper study for apprentices. The second line represents the vegetable kingdom, which the companions should learn to understand, because in this kingdom generation of bodies begins. The third line represents the animal kingdom, from the exploration of which the Master Mason must complete his education. It has been said of the Lodge of the Trinosophists that it was at one time the most intelligent society of Freemasons ever known. It adhered to the ancient landmarks but gave clearer and more satisfactory interpretations to the symbols of Freemasonry than are afforded in the symbolical lodges. It practiced 5 degrees. In the third, candidates for initiation received a philosophic and astronomic explanation of the Hermetic legend. The Egyptianized interpretation of Freemasonic symbolism, which is so evident in the writings of Raguin and other French Masonic scholars of the same period, such as Court de Gobelin and Alexandre Lenoir, is also present in the figures and text of the Saint Germain manuscript. In his comments on the Rite of Mizraim, called the Egyptian Rite, Raguin distinguishes 90 degrees of Masonic mysteries. The 1st to 33rd degrees he terms symbolic, the 34th to 66 degrees, philosophic the 67th to 77th, mystic in the 78th to 90th, Kabbalistic. The Egyptian Freemasonry of Cagliostro may also have been derived from Saint Germain, or from some common body of illuminists of whom Saint Germain was the moving spirit. Cagliostro's memoirs contain a direct statement of his initiation to the Order of Knights Templars at the hands of Saint Germain. Deluchet gives what a modern writer on Cagliostro calls a fantastic account of the visit paid by Alessandro and his wife, the Comtesse Felicitas, to Saint Germain in Germany, and their subsequent initiation by him into the sect of the Rosicrucians, of which he was the Grand Master or chief. There is nothing improbable in the assumption that Cagliostro secured La Très Sainte Trinosophie from Saint Germain, and that the manuscript is in every respect an authentic ritual of this society. The word Trinosophie quite properly infers a triple meaning to the contents of the book, in other words, that its meaning should be interpreted with the aid of three keys. From the symbolism, it seems that one of these keys is alchemy, or soul chemistry, another Essenian Kabbalism, and the third Alexandrian Hermetism, the mysticism of the later Egyptians. In such fragments of the Rosicrucian lore as now exists, it is evident that the Brethren of the Rose Cross were especially addicted to these three forms of the ancient wisdom, and chose the symbols of these schools as the vehicles of their ideas. The technical task of decoding the hieroglyphics occurring throughout La Très Sainte Trinosophie was assigned to Dr. Edward C. Getzinger, an eminent authority on ancient alphabets and languages, who is now engaged in the decoding of the primitive ciphers in the Book of Genesis. A few words from his notes will give an idea of the difficulties involved in decoding. Archaic writings are usually in one system of letters or characters, but those among the ancients who were in possession of the sacred mysteries of life and certain secret astronomical cycles never trusted this knowledge to ordinary writing, but devised secret codes by which they concealed their wisdom from the unworthy. Each of these communities or brotherhoods of the enlightened devised its own code. About 3000 BC, only the initiates and their scribes could read and write. At that period, the simpler methods of concealment were in vogue, one of which was to drop certain letters from words in such a manner that the remaining letters still formed a word which, however, conveyed an entirely different sense. As ages progressed, other systems were invented, until human ingenuity was taxed to the utmost in an endeavor to conceal and yet perpetuate sacred knowledge. In order to decipher ancient writings of a religious or philosophic nature, it is first necessary to discover the code or method of concealment used by the scribe. In all my 20 years of experience as a reader of archaic writings, I have never encountered such ingenious codes and methods of concealment as are found in this manuscript. In only a few instances are complete phrases written in the same alphabet. Usually 2 or 3 forms of writing are employed, with letters written upside down, reversed, or with the text written backwards. Vowels are often omitted, and at times several letters are missing with merely dots to indicate their number. Every combination of hieroglyphics seemed hopeless at the beginning, yet after hours of alphabetic dissection, one familiar word would appear. This gave a clue as to the language used and established a place where word combination might begin, and then a sentence would gradually unfold. The various texts are written in Chaldean Hebrew, Ionic Greek, Arabic, Syriac, cuneiform, Greek hieroglyphics, and ideographs. The keynote throughout this material is that of the approach of the age when the leg of the grand man and the waterman of the zodiac shall meet in conjunction at the equinox and end the grand 400,000-year cycle. This points to a culmination of eons as mentioned in the Apocalypse. Behold, I make a new heaven and a new earth, meaning a series of new cycles and a new humanity. The personage who gathered the material in this manuscript was indeed one whose spiritual understanding might be envied. He found these various texts in different parts of Europe, no doubt, and that he had a true knowledge of their import is proved by the fact that he attempted to conceal some 40 fragmentary ancient texts by scattering them within the lines of his own writing. Yet his own text does not appear to have any connection with these ancient writings. If a decipherer were to be guided by what this eminent scholar wrote, he would never decipher the mystery concealed within the cryptic words. There is a marvelous spiritual story written by this savant, and a more wonderful one he interwove within the pattern of his own narrative. The result is a story within a story. In the reprinting of the French text of the Trinosophia, the spelling and punctuation is according to the original. It has been impossible, however, to reproduce certain peculiarities of the calligraphy. In some cases, the punctuation is obscure, accents are omitted, and dashes of varying lengths are inserted to fill out lines. The present manuscript is undoubtedly a copy, as Philotom stated. The archaic characters in the hieroglyphics reveal minor imperfections of formation due to the copyist being unfamiliar with the alphabets employed. The considerable extent of the notes and commentaries has made it advisable to place them together at the end of the work rather than break up the continuity of the text by overfrequent interpolations. La Très Sainte Trinosophie is not a manuscript for the tyro. Only deep study and consideration will unravel the complicated skein of its symbolism. Although the text matter is treated with the utmost simplicity, every line is a profound enigma. Careful perusal of the book and meditation upon its contents will convince the scholar that it has been well designated the most precious known manuscript of occultism. Trinosophia Section I. It is in the retreat of criminals in the dungeons of the Inquisition that your friend writes these lines, which are to serve for your instruction. That the thought of the inestimable advantages which this document of friendship will procure for you, the horrors of a long and little deserved captivity seem to be mitigated. It gives me pleasure to think that while surrounded by guards and encumbered by chains, a slave may still be able to raise his friend above the mighty, the monarchs who rule this place of exile. My dear Philauchatus, you are about to penetrate into the sanctuary of the sublime sciences. My hand is about to raise for you the impenetrable veil which hides from the eyes of common men the tabernacle, the sanctuary wherein the Eternal has lodged the secrets of nature, kept for a few that are privileged, the few elect whom his omnipotence created that they may see, and seeing may soar after him in the vast expanse of his glory and deflect upon mankind one of the rays that shine round about his golden throne. If your friend's example proves a salutary lesson for you, I shall bless the long years of tribulation which the wicked have made me suffer. Two stumbling blocks, equally dangerous, will constantly present themselves to you. One of them would outrage the sacred rights of every individual. It is misuse of the power which God will have entrusted to you. The other, which would bring ruin upon you, is indiscretion. Both are born of the same mother, both owe their existence to pride. Human frailty nourishes them, they are blind, their mother leads them. With her aid these two monsters carry their foul breath even into the hearts of the Lord's elect. Woe unto him who misuses the gifts of heaven in order to serve his passions. The almighty hand that made the elements subject to him would break him like a fragile reed. An eternity of torments could hardly expiate his crime. The infernal spirits would smile with contempt at the tears of the one whose menacing voice had so often made them tremble in the bosom of their fiery depths. It is not for you, Philauchatus, that I sketch this dreadful picture. The friend of humanity will never become its persecutor. The precipice, my son, which I fear for you, is indiscretion, the imperious craving to inspire astonishment and admiration. God leaves to men the task of punishing the imprudent minister who permits the eye of the profane to look into the mysterious sanctuary. O Philauchatus, may my sorrows be ever present in your mind. I too have known happiness, was showered with the blessings of heaven and surrounded by power, such as the human mind cannot conceive. Commanding the genii that guide the world, happy in the happiness that I created, I enjoyed within the bosom of an adored family the felicity which the Eternal accords to his beloved children. One moment destroyed everything. I spoke and it all vanished like a cloud. O my son, follow not in my steps. Let no vain desire to shine before men bring you to disaster. Think of me, your friend, writing to you from this dungeon, my body broken by torture. Remember, Philauchatus, that the hand which traces these characters bears the marks of the chains which weigh it down. God has punished me, but what have I done to the cruel men that persecute me? What right have they to interrogate the minister of the Eternal? They ask me what are the proofs of my mission. My witnesses are prodigies, and my virtues are my defenders, a clean life, a pure heart. But what am I saying? Have I still the right to complain? I spoke, and the Lord delivered me, deprived of strength and power, to the furies of greedy fanaticism. The arm which once could overthrow an army can today hardly lift the chains that weigh it down. I wander. I should give thanks to eternal justice. The avenging God has pardoned his repentant child. An aerial spirit has entered through the walls which separate me from the world. He has shown himself to me resplendent with light, and has determined the duration of my captivity. Within 2 years my sufferings will end. My torturers upon entering my cell will find it empty, and soon purified by the four elements, pure as the genius of fire, I shall resume the glorious station to which divine goodness has raised me. But how distant as yet is this time? How long 2 years seem to one who spends them in suffering and humiliation. Not content with making me undergo the most horrible agony, my oppressors, to torture me further, have devised still surer, still more revolting means. They have brought infamy on my head, have made my name a thing of disgrace. The children of men recoil in terror. When by chance they approach the walls of my prison, they fear lest some deadly vapor escape through the narrow slit that reluctantly admits a ray of light to my cell. That, O Philauchatus, is the cruelest of all blows that they could bear down upon me. I know not whether I shall be able to get this document into your hands. I judge the difficulty I shall have in contriving for it a way out of this place of torture by those I have had in order to write it. Deprived of all help, I myself have composed the agents I needed. The flame of my lamp, some coins, and a few chemical substances overlooked by the scrutinizing eyes of my tormentors have yielded the colors which adorn this fruit of a prisoner's leisure. Profit by the instructions of your unhappy friend. They are so clear that danger exists for them to fall into hands other than yours. Remember only that all of it is to serve you. An obscure line, an omitted character would prevent your lifting the veil which the hand of the Creator has placed over the Sphinx. Adieu, Philochatus. Do not mourn me. The clemency of the Eternal equals his justice. At the first mysterious assembly you will see your friend again. I salute you in the name of God. Soon I shall give the kiss of peace to my brother. And Trinosophia Section II. It was night. The moon, veiled by dark clouds, cast but an uncertain light on the crags of lava that hemmed in the Solfatara. My head covered with the linen veil, holding in my hands the golden bow, I advanced without fear toward the spot where I had been ordered to pass the night. I was groping over hot sand which I felt give way under my every step. The clouds gathered overhead. Lightning flashed through the night and gave to the flames of the volcano a blood-like appearance. At last I arrived and found an iron altar where I placed the mysterious bow. I pronounced the formidable words. Instantly the earth trembles under my feet, thunder peals. Vesuvius roars in answer to the repeated strokes, its fires join the fires of lightning. The choirs of the genii rise into the air, and make the echoes repeat the praises of the Creator. The hallowed bow which I had placed on the triangular altar suddenly is ablaze. A thick smoke envelops me. I cease to see. Wrapped in darkness, I seem to descend into an abyss. I know not how long I remained in that situation. When I opened my eyes, I vainly looked for the objects which had surrounded me a little time ago. The altar of Vesuvius, the country round Naples, had vanished far from my sight. I was in a vast cavern, alone, far away from the whole world. Near by me lay a long, white robe. Its loosely woven tissue seemed to me to be of linen. On a granite boulder stood a copper lamp upon a black table covered with Greek words indicating the way I was to follow. I took the lamp, and after having put on the robe, I entered a narrow passage, the walls of which were covered with black marble. It was 3 miles long, and my steps resounded fearfully under its silent vault. At last I found a door that opened on a flight of steps, which I descended. After having walked a long time, I seemed to see a wandering light before me. I hid my lamp and fixed my eyes on the object which I beheld. It dissipated, vanishing like a shadow. Without reproach of the past, without fear of the future, I went on. The way became increasingly difficult. Always confined within galleries composed of black stone blocks, I did not dare to guess at the length of my underground travel. At last, after a long march, I came to a square chamber. A door in the middle of each of its 4 sides opened. They were of different colors, and each door was placed at one of the 4 cardinal points. I entered through the north door, which was black. The opposite one was red. The door to the east was blue, and the one facing it was of dazzling white. In the middle of this chamber was a square mass. On its center shone a crystal star. On the north side was a painting representing a woman naked to the waist. A black drapery fell over her knees, and 2 silver bands adorned her garment. In her hand was a rod, which she placed against the forehead of a man facing her across a table, which stood on a single support and bore a cup and a lance head. A sudden flame rose from the ground and seemed to turn toward the man. An inscription explained this picture. Another indicated the means I was to employ in order to leave this chamber. After having contemplated the picture and the star, I was about to pass through the red door when, in turning on its hinges with terrific noise, it closed before me. I made the same attempt with the door of sky blue color. It did not close, but a sudden noise induced me to turn my head. I saw the star flicker, rise from its place, revolve, then dart rapidly through the opening of the white door. I followed it at once. Trinosophia Section III. A strong wind arose, and I had difficulty in keeping my lamp alight. At last I saw a white marble platform to which I mounted by 9 steps. Arrived at the last one, I beheld a vast expanse of water. And to my right I heard the impetuous tumbling of torrents. To my left a cold rain mixed with masses of hail fell near me. I was contemplating this majestic scene when the star which had guided me to the platform, and which was slowly swinging overhead, plunged into the gulf. Believing that I was reading the commands of the Most High, I threw myself into the midst of the waves. An invisible hand seized my lamp and placed it on the crown of my head. I breasted the foamy wave and struggled to reach the side opposite the one which I had left. At last I saw on the horizon a feeble gleam and hastened forward. Perspiration streamed down my face and I exhausted myself in vain efforts. The shore, which I could scarcely discern, seemed to recede to the degree one advanced. My strength was ebbing. I feared not to die, but to die without illumination. I lost courage, and lifting to the vault my tear-streaming eyes, I cried out, Judica judicium meum redime me, propter eloquium tuum vivifica me. Judge thou my judgment and redeem me, by thy eloquence make me live. I could hardly move my tired limbs and was sinking more and more when near me I saw a boat. A richly dressed man guided it. I noticed that the prow was turned toward the shore which I had left. He drew near. A golden crown shone on his forehead. Vade mecum, said he. Mecum principium interis, instrumento in via aqua gradueris. Come with me, the foremost in the world, I will show thee the way thou must follow, I instantly answered him. Bonum esperare in Domino quam considerem principibus. It is better to trust in the Lord than to sit among the mighty. Whereupon the boat sank and the monarch with it. Fresh energy seemed to course through my veins and I gained the goal of my efforts. I found myself on a shore covered with green sand. A silver wall was before me inlaid with 2 panels of red marble. Approaching, I noticed on one of them sacred script. The other being engraved with a line of Greek letters between the 2 plates was an iron circle. 2 lions, one red and the other black, rested on clouds and appeared to guard a golden crown above them. Also near the circle were to be seen a bow and 2 arrows. I read several characters written on the flanks of one of the lions. I had barely observed these different emblems when they vanished together with the wall which contained them. Trinosophia Section IV. In its place a lake of fire presented itself to my sight. Sulfur and bitumen rolled in flaming waves. I trembled. A loud voice commanded me to pass through the flames. I obeyed, and the flames seemed to have lost their power. For a long time I walked within the conflagration. Arrived at a circular space, I contemplated the gorgeous spectacle, which by the grace of heaven it was given me to enjoy. 40 columns of fire ornamented the hall in which I found myself. One side of the columns shone with a white and vivid fire, the other side seemed to be in shadow, a blackish flame covered it. In the center of this place stood an altar in the form of a serpent. A greenish gold embellished its diapered scales in which the surrounding flames were reflected. Its eyes looked like rubies. A silvery inscription was placed near it and a rich sword had been driven into the ground near the serpent, on whose head rested a cup. I heard the choir of the celestial spirits, and a voice said to me, The end of thy labors draws near. Take the sword and smite the serpent. I drew the sword from its sheath, and approaching the altar I took the cup with one hand, and with the other I struck a terrific blow upon the neck of the serpent. The sword rebounded and the blow re-echoed as if I had struck on a brass bell. No sooner had I obeyed the voice than the altar disappeared and the columns vanished in boundless space. The sound which I had heard when striking the altar repeated itself, as if 1,000 blows had been struck at the same time. A hand seized me by the hair and lifted me toward the vault which opened to let me through. Shadowy phantoms appeared before me, hydras, lamnias, and serpents surrounded me. The sight of the sword in my hand scattered the foul throng, even as the first rays of light dissipate the frail dream children of the night. After mounting straight upward through the layers that composed the walls of the globe, I saw again the light of day. Trinosophia Section V. Scarcely had I risen to the surface of the earth, when my unseen guide led me still more swiftly. The velocity with which we sped through space can be compared with naught but itself. In an instant I had lost sight of the plains below. I noticed with astonishment that I had emerged from the bowels of the earth, far from the country about Naples. A desert and some triangular masses were the only objects I could see. Soon, in spite of the trials which I had undergone, a new terror assailed me. The earth seemed to me only a vague cloud. I had been lifted to a tremendous height. My invisible guide left me, and I descended again. For quite a long time I rolled through space. Already the earth spread out before my confused vision. I could estimate how many minutes would pass until I would be crushed on the rocks. But quick as thought my guide darts down beside me, takes hold of me, lifts me up again, and again lets me fall. Finally, he raises me with him to an immeasurable distance. I saw globes revolve around me and earths gravitate at my feet. Suddenly, the genius who bore me touched my eyes and I swooned. I know not how long I remained in this condition. When I awoke, I was lying on a luxurious cushion. The air I breathed was saturated with the fragrance of flowers. A blue robe spangled with golden stars had replaced my linen garment. A yellow altar stood opposite me, from which a pure flame ascended, having no other substance for its alimentation than the altar itself. Letters in black were engraved at the base of the altar. A lighted torch stood beside it, shining like the sun. Hovering above it was a bird with black feet, silvery body, a red head, black wings, and a golden neck. It was in constant motion without, however, using its wings. It could only fly when in the midst of the flames. In its beak was a green branch. Its name is. The name of the altar is. Altar, bird, and torch are the symbol of all things. Nothing can be done without them. They themselves are all that is good and great. The name of the torch is. 4 inscriptions surrounded these different emblems. Trinosophia Section VI. I turned aside and noticed an immense palace, the base of which rested on clouds. Its mass was composed of marble and its form was triangular. 4 tiers of columns were raised one above the other. A golden ball topped the edifice. The first tier of columns was white, the second black, the third green, and the last one a brilliant red. I intended, after having admired this work of immortal artists, to return to the place of the altar, the bird and the torch. I desired to study them further. They had disappeared, and with my eyes I was searching for them when the doors of the palace opened. A venerable old man came forth clad in a robe like mine, except that a golden sun shone on his breast. His right hand held a green branch, the other upheld a censer. A wooden chain was about his neck, and a pointed tiara like that of Zoroaster covered his white head. He came toward me, a benevolent smile on his lips. "Adore God," said he to me in Persian. "It is he who sustained thee in thy trials. His spirit was with thee. My son, thou hast let slip by the opportunity. Thou couldst have seized instantly the bird, the torch, and the altar. Thou wouldst have become altar, bird, and torch at one and the same time. Now, in order to arrive at the most secret place of the palace of sublime sciences, it will be necessary for thee to pass through all byways. Come. I must first of all present thee to my brothers." He took me by the hand and led me into a vast hall. The eyes of the vulgar cannot conceive the form and richness of the ornaments which embellished it. 360 columns enclosed it on all sides. Suspended from a golden ring in the ceiling was a cross of red, white, blue, and black. In the center of the hall was a triangular altar composed of the 4 elements. On its 3 points were placed the bird, the altar, and the torch. "Their names are now changed," said my guide. "Here the bird is called the altar, and the torch. The hall is called and the triangular altar." On the altar were placed 81 thrones, to each of which one mounted by 9 steps of unequal height, the treads being covered with red carpets. While I was examining the thrones, a trumpet sounded, whereupon the doors of the hall swung on their hinges to let pass 79 persons, all attired like my guide. Slowly they came near and seated themselves on the thrones while my guide stood beside me. An old man, distinguished from his brothers by a purple mantle, the hem of which was covered with embroidered characters, arose, and my guide, addressing them in the sacred tongue, said, "Behold one of our children whom it is the will of God to make as great as his fathers." "May the will of the Lord be done," responded the old man, and turning to me he added, "My son, the time of thy physical trials is now ended. There remain long journeys for thee to undertake. Henceforth thy name shall be. Before thou visit this edifice, each of my 8 brothers and myself will present thee with a gift." He walked up to me, and with the kiss of peace gave me a cube of gray earth called. The second gave me 3 cylinders of black stone called. The third a small piece of rounded crystal called. The fourth a crest of blue plumes named. The fifth added a silver vase which carries the name of. The sixth gave me a cluster of grapes known by the sages under the name of. The seventh presented me with the figure of a bird similar in its form too. But it had not its brilliant hues, it was of silver. It has the same name, he said to me. It is for thee to give it the same virtues. The eighth gave me a small altar, resembling the altar. Finally, my guide placed in my hand a torch composed like of brilliant particles. However, it was not lighted. It is for thee, he added, like those that have preceded it, to give it the same virtues. Reflect on these gifts. Then said the chief sage, they all lead equally to perfection, but none of them is perfect in itself. It is from their admixture that the divine product must come. Know also that all of them are null if thou employ them not in the order in which thou hast received them. The second, which serves for the use of the first, remains merely crude matter without warmth and without usefulness unless in its turn it is aided by that which comes after it. Guard carefully the gifts thou hast received and set out upon thy journeys after thou hast drunk from the cup of life. Hereupon he handed me in a crystal cup a shining liquor of saffron hue. Its taste was delicious, and it emitted an exquisite aroma. I was about to hand the cup back to him after moistening my lips in the liquor, when the old man said, drink it all, it will be thy only nourishment during thy journeys. I obeyed and felt a divine fire course through all the fibers of my body. I was stronger, braver, even my intellectual powers seemed doubled. I hastened to give the greeting of the wise men to the august assembly. I was about to leave, and at my guide's command I entered a long gallery on my right hand. Trinosophia Section VII. At the entrance of this gallery stood an oval steel vessel, which upon my approach filled with crystal clear water, purified by fine white sand. The vessel rested on 3 brass feet. A black panel had engraved on it several characters on the side facing the door. Near the vessel was a linen veil, and above the vessel 2 green marble columns supported a round marble plaque. One saw there, surrounded by 2 inscriptions, the figure of the sacred seal formed of a cross in 4 colors, attached to a golden cross piece which upheld 2 other concentric circles, the larger one being black, the other red, and to one of the columns was attached a silver axe with a blue handle, it is called. After reading the inscriptions, I went up to the vessel and washed first my hands, but finished by plunging in bodily. I stayed there 3 days, and on coming out of the water I saw that it had lost its transparency. Its sand had become grayish and rust-colored particles stirred in the fluid. I tried to dry myself with the linen veil, but fresh drops of water kept taking the place of those the linen absorbed. I gave up trying to dry myself with the veil, and keeping in the shade, I remained there motionless for 6 whole days. At the end of this time, the source of these waters was exhausted. I found that I was dry and lighter, though my strength seemed to be increased. After walking about for a little while, I returned to the vessel. The water which had been in it was gone. In its place was a reddish liquid. The sand was gray and metallic. I again bathed in it, being careful, however, to remain there only a few moments. When stepping out of it, I noticed that I had absorbed part of the liquid. This time I did not try to dry myself with the cloth, for the liquor with which I was saturated was so strong and corrosive that it would have instantly destroyed the fabric. I found myself at the other end of the gallery, stretched out on a bed of warm sand, where I spent 7 days. After this time I returned to the vessel. The water was as it had first appeared. Once more I plunged into it, and after having washed myself carefully, came out. This time I had no difficulty in drying myself. Finally, after having purified myself according to the instructions I had received, I prepared to leave this gallery, in which I had spent 16 days. Trinosophia Section VIII. I left the gallery by a low and narrow door, and entered a circular apartment, the paneling of which was made of ash and sandalwood. At the further end of the apartment, on a pedestal composed of the trunk of a vine, lay a mass of white and shining salt. Above was a picture showing a crowned white lion and a cluster of grapes. Both rested on a salver sustained in the air by the smoke of a lighted brazier. To my right and left 2 doors opened, one giving unto an arid plain. A dry and scorching wind blew over it continually. The other door opened on a lake, at the extreme end of which a black marble facade could be seen. I approached the altar and took into my hands some of the white and shining salt which the sages call, and rubbed my entire body with it. I impregnated myself with it, and after having read the hieroglyphics accompanying the picture, I prepared to leave this hall. My first intention was to leave by the door opening upon the plain, but there issued therefrom a hot vapor, and I preferred the opposite path. I had the freedom of choice, with the condition, however, not to leave the one once chosen. I decided to cross the lake. Its waters were somber and sleeping. At a certain distance I clearly noticed a bridge called To reach it, I would have been obliged to follow the windings of a shore covered with rocks, and I preferred to cross the lake. I entered the water, which was as thick as cement. I noticed that it was useless for me to swim since my feet touched bottom everywhere. I walked in the lake for 13 days. At last I came to the other shore. Trinosophia Section IX. The earth was as dark as the water through which I had come. A hardly perceptible slope led me to the base of the building which I had seen from afar. On its long square front several characters were engraved like those used by the priests of ancient Persia. The entire building was made of rough black basalt, the doors of cypress wood, open to let me pass. A warm, moist wind arose suddenly and pushed me rapidly to the middle of the chamber, at the same time closing the doors upon me. I was in darkness, but gradually my eyes grew accustomed to the meager light which reigned in this enclosure, and I was able to discern the surrounding objects. The vaulting, the walls, and the floor of the chamber were as black as ebony. Two mural paintings arrested my attention. One represented a horse such as our poets describe as having caused the downfall of Troy. From its gaping flanks a human corpse protruded. The other image showed a man long dead. Vile insects bred by putrefaction swarmed over his face and devoured the substance which had given them birth. One of the arms of the dead man, stripped of its flesh, already showed he bones. A man, dressed in red, standing by the corpse, endeavored to lift it. A star shone on his forehead. His legs were enclosed in black buskins. Above, between and below the picture were 3 black panels bearing silver characters. I read them and then occupied the time by making the rounds of the hall where I was to spend 9 days. In a dark corner, I found a pile of black earth which was fat and saturated with animal particles. I was about to take some of it when a thundering voice, like the sound of a trumpet, forbade me to do so, saying, "This earth has lain in this hall only 87 years, when 13 more years have elapsed. Thou and the other children of God may use it." The voice fell silent, but its last ringing sounds continued to vibrate a long time in that temple of silence and death. After remaining in it the time prescribed, I departed by the door opposite to the one through which I had entered. I again saw the light, but it was not so strong around the black hall as to tire my eyes habituated to darkness. I saw with surprise that, in order to reach the other buildings, I should have to cross a wider lake than the first one. For 18 days I walked in the water. I recalled that when crossing the first lake its waters became darker and thicker as I advanced. The waters of this lake, on the contrary, became ever clearer the closer I approached the shore. And my robe, which had in the palace become as black as the walls, seemed to me to be of a grayish hue. Gradually, it resumed its colors, however. It did not become entirely blue, but was nearer to a beautiful green. After 18 days, I ascended the embankment by means of a white marble platform. The name of the hall is the First Lake. The Second. Trinosophia Section X. At some distance from the shore, a sumptuous palace raised aloft its alabaster columns. Its different parts were joined by porticos of flame color. The entire edifice was of light and airy architecture. As I approached the portals, I saw that the front was decorated with the figure of a butterfly. The door stood open. I entered. The entire palace consisted of a single hall, surrounded by a triple colonnade, each rank composed of 27 alabaster columns. In the middle of the building stood the figure of a man issuing from a tomb. His hand, holding up a lance, struck the stone which previously confined him. His loins were girt about with a green garment. Gold gleamed from its hem. On his breast was a square tablet bearing several letters. Above this figure hung a golden crown, and the figure seemed to lift itself into the air in order to seize the crown. Above it was a yellow stone tablet bearing several emblems, which I explained by means of the inscription I saw on the tomb and by the one I had seen on the breast of the man. I stayed in that hall, which is called the time needful for contemplating all its aisles, and soon I left it with the intention of crossing a vast plain in order to reach a tower that I had perceived at quite some distance. Trinosophia Section XI. No sooner had I quitted the steps of the palace when I saw fluttering in front of me a bird similar to this one, however, having 2 wings like a butterfly's besides its own. A voice issuing from a cloud commanded me to seize and to affix it, and I darted forth after it. It did not fly, but used its wings in order to run with the greatest rapidity. I pursued it. It fled before me and made me cover the entire plain several times. I followed it without pause. Finally, after pursuing it for 9 days, I forced it to enter the tower which I had seen in the distance as I was leaving. The walls of this edifice were of iron. 36 columns of the same metal supported it. The interior was of the same material, encrusted with shining steel. The foundations of the tower were so constructed as to be twice as deep in the earth as they were high above ground. The bird had barely entered this enclosure when an icy cold seemed to overcome it. In vain it tried to move its numbed wings. It still fluttered, trying to flee, but so feebly that I reached it with the greatest ease. I seized the bird, and driving a steel nail there through its wings, I affixed it to the floor of the tower, with the aid of a hammer called. Hardly had I finished when the bird acquired new strength. It did not move, however, but its eyes began to shine like topaz. I was gazing at it when my attention was attracted by a group in the center of the hall. It showed a handsome man in the prime of life. In his hand he held a staff about which 2 serpents were interlaced. The young man was striving to escape a larger and more powerful man who wore a girdle and a helmet of iron surmounted by waving red plumes. Near him a sword lay on a buckler covered with hieroglyphs. The armed man held in his hand a heavy chain with which he shackled the feet and body of the youth who tried in vain to flee from his terrible adversary. 2 red tablets bore certain characters. I departed from the tower, and opening a door between 2 pillars, I found myself in a vast hall. Trinosophia Section XII. The hall into which I had just entered was perfectly round. It resembled the interior of a globe composed of hard and transparent matter as crystal, so that the light entered from all sides. Its lower part rested upon a vast basin filled with red sand. A gentle and equable warmth reigned in this circular enclosure. The sages call this hall. The basin of sand sustaining it is called. With astonishment I gazed around this crystal globe when a new phenomenon excited my admiration. From the floor of the hall ascended a gentle vapor, moist and saffron yellow. It enveloped me, raised me gently, and within 36 days bore me up to the upper part of the globe. Thereafter the vapor thinned little by little. I descended and finally found myself again on the floor. My robe had changed its color. It had been green when I entered the hall, but now changed to a brilliant red. A contrary effect had taken place in the sand on which the globe rested. Gradually its red color had been transformed into black. After finishing my ascent, I remained 3 more days in that hall. After that time I left it in order to enter a large place surrounded by colonnades and gilded porticos. In the center of the place stood a bronze pedestal supporting a group representing a large strong man whose majestic head was covered with a crown helmet. A blue garment protruded through the meshes of his golden armor. In one hand he held a white staff bearing certain characters, the other hand he extended toward a beautiful woman. His companion wore no garment, but a sun radiated from her breast. Her right hand held 3 globes, joined by golden rings. A coronet of red flowers confined her beautiful hair. She sprang into the air and seemed to lift with her the warrior who accompanied her. Both were borne up by the clouds about the group. On the capitals of 4 white marble columns were set 4 bronze statues. They had wings and appeared to sound trumpets. I crossed the place, and mounting on a marble platform which was before me, I noticed with astonishment that I had re-entered the Hall of Thrones, the first in which I had found myself when entering the Palace of Wisdom. The triangular altar was still in the center of this hall, but the bird, the altar, and the torch were joined and formed a single body. Near them was a golden sun. The sword which I had brought from the Hall of Fire lay a few paces distant on the cushion of one of the thrones. I took up the sword and struck the sun, reducing it to dust. I then touched it, and each molecule became a golden sun like the one I had broken. At that instant a loud and melodious voice exclaimed, "The work is perfect." Hearing this, the children of light hastened to join me. The doors of immortality were opened to me, and the cloud which covers the eyes of mortals was dissipated. I saw, and the spirits which preside over the elements knew me for their master. Finis.
Thank you for joining me as we explored the profound insights of the Most Holy Trinosophia of the Comte de Saint Germain. If these ancient teachings have ignited a spark within you, you won't want to miss what comes next. In our upcoming video, we'll dive into part 4, where the real alchemy unfolds with notes and commentaries that uncover the secrets woven throughout the text. If you're eager to unlock more wisdom and deepen your understanding, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified when the next video is released.